How's it going, people, and welcome back to the Supporters Club. It's been a shorter while than usual. I hope you watched the last show we did a couple of days ago, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's international break. There's no club football on, so what are you doing? Make sure you watch the content, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, do all of that. And if you did watch the last one, you'd know it's the legend Chris Hudson in the building, and Sheroy is back in the building too, from Sheroy's Voice. Yet to launch, but coming real soon. And we're moving on to the next subject. We've talked about the good, the bad, the ugly, the first 4 games of the season and our hopes moving forward. But let's talk about Champions League now. This one's titled Champions League, Having a Laugh. Why? Because in recent videos, I've said Arsenal can win the Champions League. In recent videos, I said Arsenal are probably behind City, Bayern Munich and Real Madrid in terms of, you know, being fourth favourites or being in the pool of fourth favourites, maybe with Napoli and a couple other sides. And opposition fans down my neck, Arsenal can't do this. You haven't been in it in 7 years. Be humble. Who do you think you are? You know European heritage. Well, we're back in it, and when I look at the level of the Champions League now, it's a far cry from what it was 7 years ago when we was in it before, Chris. It seems like there's a big chance here. Obviously, luck of the draw matters too, but what are your expectations in the Champions League? Now we've seen our group, Sevilla, Lens, PSV, should top it.
Mortally upset if we don't get out of the group. So I'm assuming we're going to get out of the group.
Top. We should be finishing top.
Thing is, what worries me is our Arsenal heritage in Europe is pretty poor. But you know, you've got to change it one day.
Is it the heritage that worries you, or is it Arteta's record in Europe that worries you? Because I think heritage, sometimes we talk about heritage a lot, and heritage matters. History matters. History is what makes big clubs great clubs. But you can be a part of creating this heritage. You can be a part of creating this history.
I think Arteta's a different coach to what he was the last time he was in Europe. So well, I'm going to forget that. I think it's in the lap of the football gods, Turkish, really. I mean, for me, it's the holy grail. If we win that, that's it. I'll retire.
You retire. No more Chris on Supporters Club. We win the Champions League.
I'll just retire to a desert island, look at my old programmes.
You've completed it. You've completed it. Well deserved. Sheroy, back in the Champions League, a favourable group to say the least. I mean, expectations, top the group?
Yeah, 100%. But I wouldn't say it's a foregone conclusion, man. I remember watching the Champions League draw and everyone on Twitter saying, boom, that's a Europa League group.
Yeah.
And I was just sat there thinking, okay, it might be a Europa League group, but it's the upper end of the Europa League teams, one, and our performance in the Europa League since we've been in it has been suboptimal. Yeah, we've gone out in horrific fashion. So that does need to be rectified. Now I'm sitting there thinking, okay, fine. We now have players like Jorginho, who isn't getting many Premier League minutes, but does have that European pedigree, who can perhaps slot in. We've got slightly more variety in other positions, so we should be able to perhaps rotate without burning players out, which may have cost us in previous years. But by no means is it a foregone conclusion. And on your point about, you know, Manchester City being the sort of front runners and the fact that they won it last year, I know that we were the team to push them the furthest in the Premier League last year.
Yeah.
But the Champions League, by the time we end up playing someone like a Manchester City, you're looking at the knockout stages. Mm-hmm. If that game at the Emirates that we had in the league last year, or the game at the Etihad, is the standard, we're out. The golfing class in those 2 isolated games is problematic, is really problematic. So yeah, we've elevated in the sense that over a 38-game season, we can perhaps get closer to City, but can we do it in the one-off? And that's what the Champions League is about, right? And if you, I watch the Big Six a lot, and when I listen to, you know, the Grizzlies and the Matisses and all of them saying, listen, Champions League is different. I'm old enough to remember that Champions League is different. I don't need to be
special.
Exactly. I don't need to be told. But these players now, Saka, when he's playing in the Premier League, who's really in the conversation on the right wing apart from Salah?
That's it.
But when you're looking at these sorts of players and just wide men generally, now he's up there and there's all eyes on people like Vinicius on the other flank or whatever. He's now got to prove himself at that level. And that's where you get the additional layer of pressure upon young shoulders. So this is just me playing devil's advocate here. I'm confident in terms of we should top the group. But there are reasons to sit here and hold your cards close to your chest.
100%, and I'm going to stick with you, Sheroy, because you raise a fair point, but surely it's up to us fans as well to keep standards high. And expectations is one thing, but you're right, it's not a foregone conclusion. But I wouldn't want to put us down potentially in the Champions League, Because the reality is we should top the group. Whether we do or not, yes, there's worries there because of our recent form in Europe, the return to Champions League and so on. But we should top the group. So I think as fans, we've got to make sure that our expectations are set, and these are the standards that Arteta has helped bring, raising the bar. But if we do fail, that, you know, the standards haven't been met, why haven't they been met? What do we need? That's why I'm not confident in the Champions League, but I'm confident to go into the latter stages for sure. And by latter stages, I mean quarterfinals, potentially semis. Now, I'd love nothing more than to see Man City play Real Madrid in the quarterfinals or semi-finals, and maybe Bayern Munich's out by then and we get a favourable draw like maybe Inter Milan, AC Milan did along the way last season. Even Tottenham, albeit they actually got past City on their run, which was a big coup for them. I'm just hoping for the best, but the expectations are one thing, right, Sheroy? And the worries are another thing.
100%, 100%. And look, if we got that group, for example, in any competition, we'd be sitting there saying we should be topping that group. If we haven't, what did you say? You'd be mortally upset or something along those lines. They would
mortified.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there would have to be some sort of malfunction for us not to top that group, because if we are 10-10, which you damn sure ought to be in the Champions League, and any of those other teams are 10-10, we still beat them.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's all going to be down to squad strength, isn't it?
That's where.
When's the nitty gritty of the Champions League? There's the nitty gritty of the Premier League: March, April, May.
Do you think, we just talked about the good, the bad, the ugly in the first 4 games and the change in tactical approach? Do you think, and this wasn't raised, but do you think part of that is with Champions League in mind and maybe offering an alternative in Europe too?
The thing is, what we haven't spoke about is the loss of Timber.
Massive.
He is a Champions League.
Yeah, that one hurt.
He's a Champions League footballer, and I'm praying. I'm keeping everything crossed. He could be back for March, and that'd be a major. He could. I know.
I know.
Pray hard, brother. You're gonna have to pray hard for that one.
Yeah, but you know,
physical's one thing, mental's another thing after an ACL.
Match ready, man.
I know we don't really speak this now, but I think the Timber injury is really. It knocked me sideways, and I think it might have knocked Arteta.
Because it's definitely light defensively all of a sudden. I mean, there's a lot of arguments that we're lighter defensively this year with Tierney gone and now Timber injured than we was last year, which at the end of the season cost us.
If I'm playing Real Madrid in the Champions League quarter-final and I've got Timber playing, I'm confident.
Yeah.
Even Real Madrid.
But then we've got Partey right back, Tomiyasu left back, and it's all over the gaff.
I don't even think about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, just on that, I know this isn't necessarily meant to be about the transfer window, but I'm going to talk about this in light of the Champions League, right? The Champions League opportunity to rotate is one thing, but there is also an element of real cohesion needed in a team for them to continue. Let's say we do start the league well. You can't rotate wholesale and expect that 11 to suddenly start performing in the Champions League, so you would want to tweak it, right? And I think players like Timber had a massive part to play in retaining players from the first 11, but perhaps offering a little bit more versatility. So we've spoken about this before, but in the transfer windows, typically we used to criticise Arsenal for being far too reactive and not being proactive. This season, we were proactive, but when adversity struck, we weren't reactive. And that is perhaps the worry, going back to what Chris said about the latter stages of the Champions League coinciding with the latter stages of the Premier League. That's when you had players for City, like Gundogan, for example, who might have been quiet and dormant, but then suddenly, bang, I'm here now. And I'm going to get you over the line. You know, and who's going to do that for us? Because if we're looking at the players who maybe aren't featuring as much in the Premier League, and you would want to make that sort of impact in the Champions League, you're looking at your Smith Rowes, your Reece Nelsons, your Jorginhos, your Vieiras, your Kiviors, and your Trossards. Look, they're good options off the bench, but I don't quite know if they're going to have that transformative effect in elite European competition in the latter stages. But I mean, that's why we talk about expectation and we talk about shoulds or whatever, but I'm excited, bro.
That's the main thing.
I'm excited. I want to hear that. Exactly. Seeing us on those Tuesday nights, seeing us on those Wednesday nights, and most importantly, I'm excited, but I'm curious. Let's see how we fare against this lot. I'm with you when you said you wanted Bayern.
Yeah.
I wanted that test. I wanted to see if we could right that wrong. I wanted to see if we have come as far as we actually say we have. You know, these are all things that we need to figure out, and it's better to figure it out in the group than it is when you can get knocked out of the competition.
Especially a young team.
Saka wants to win the Ballon d'Or, doesn't he? He was asked the other night at that awards.
Of course he would want to,
And if you want to win that,
you got to live up to the Viniciuses and the Mbappes and the Haalands who transfer their form over to the bigger stage. And that Saka's done that in terms of international football, World Cup, Euros. England's best player 2 years in a row voted for by the fans, I believe, or journalists. Either way, it's a big achievement in itself. I want to link the transfer window to the Champions League a bit more, because as you talked about the window, I think it's very much relevant. Some fans, came off the back of the transfer window closing saying, did we have a Champions League transfer window, or was that a window that we could have had the season before being in the Europa League? Does it feel like Rice? Let's add Timber into it, even though he's injured, that's out of our hands. Rice, Timber and Havertz, who, all right, been inconsistent over the years at Chelsea, but his big moment came in the Champions League final. Does it feel like we had a Champions League summer?
That's a good question.
What do you associate with the Champions League summer? Because for me, I'm sitting there looking at, have you made acquisitions that you otherwise could have made if you weren't in the Champions League?
Exactly that.
First, Declan Rice, I think, I don't think we would have spent in excess of 100 mil if we didn't make Champions League on one player, but I also think Declan Rice would have gone to a team that had Champions League.
City.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think we would have brought him in. Now, Timber maybe would have come. We've had signings of a similar ilk where we haven't necessarily had Champions League, right? I mean, if you're looking at people like Jesus, people like Zinchenko, even people like Oba, we've had high-profile signings when we haven't had Champions League in that sort of price bracket. Kai Havertz, I don't know, maybe he would have gone to a non-Champions League team. I don't really know in that situation. David Raya, again, coming from Brentford, maybe he would have come because the lure of Arsenal is one thing. In terms of, I don't really know how to put it. The signing where you just go, whoa, they got him.
Yeah,
They got him. Declan Rice is a fantastic signing, but he's also, in a weird way, a very, very expensive prospect that hasn't quite hit his potential, even though he's very good.
Yeah.
For me, a Champions League window really is when you bring in that proven Champions League quality player, even if it is for big money, where everyone in Europe looks and goes, okay, they went and got him.
Yeah.
But there aren't too many players of that ilk. Maybe an Osimhen, for example. That's one where the continent would have turned and gone, boy.
This is big.
So that for me is perhaps one reason why we didn't have what I thought a Champions League window would look like, but there were certainly ingredients that make it a Champions League window.
And do you think that's an unfair question, because maybe a Champions League window comes off the back of actually being back in the Champions League and showing that you are somewhat ready for it?
It generates.
Yeah, a hell of a lot of money.
My oomph signing would have been, well, you're not going to get him till next Ferguson from Brighton, but we're not going to be the only people in for him.
Yeah, we won't be. Chris, minimum expectation for the Champions League?
Minimum.
As
I expect to get to the last 8. That's my minimum.
Last 8. I think I agree with that as the bare minimum.
That's minimum.
We'll look at the draw for that as well. Sheroy, you looked at Chris when he said last 8. You agree, or you think it's a bit too fair?
First year in, managers not managed in this competition before. A lot of these players would never have seen this competition before. And we're saying the minimum is to be in the best 8 in that competition. I'm not going to aggressively disagree with it, but if we go out, if we top the group quite convincingly, and we go out in the last 16, but it's to that level of relative elite opposition, I don't think I'm going to sit here unless we get absolutely mauled and we show that we're quite clearly off the mark and we're not of that level. I don't know if I'm going to sort of decimate the team in that situation. I think it is context. A lot of it depends upon who you get. Yeah, you know what? Let's go for it. Let's be a bit ballsy. Last 8, I'm with you.
And heading into the latter stage of the season, in the last 2-3 years, the talk of prioritisation always tends to come up because of squad depth. Are we all in agreement that there should be no talk of prioritisation this season? We should be fully ready to go in not only the league, the Champions League, but the FA Cup too.
And the League Cup.
Yeah, I'm not really. I don't.
I know everyone goes like that, but to me, it takes on a bit of importance, really, because our squad at the moment has got massive holes in it. That Brentford game, and I know what you're going to say. Let's try and find out how good some of these youngsters are. You might be pleasantly surprised. You don't know.
That's what I grew up on. Wenger and Sir Alex both used that competition to just throw in some.
If it's good enough to Pep to win 4 years on the trot, it's good enough for Arteta to nick. It's a trophy. I know it's nothing. I'm not saying I want to win the League Cup, but I don't want to just. I'm fed up with dismissing cup competitions like we've done for the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm not into that. I want to,
And we've got a tough fixture, Brentford away, so it'll be an interesting test. Sheroy, prioritisation at the window now. We should be ready to at least put up a fight on all fronts.
Yeah, if you are going to prioritise, for me, you prioritise everything but the Carabao Cup. Really, I don't ever want to be going into an FA Cup tie, thinking that 11 risks being dumped out of the competition. Certainly don't think we'll do that in the Premier League. I don't think we're ever going to play a heavily weakened side in the Premier League. And even in this group, in the Champions League, yes, give certain players a chance. But you can't rotate wholesale in that competition. You just can't. I mean, we rotated wholesale in certain Europa League games and struggled. You can't be doing that in the Champions League, you know. And we're now at that stage where you can't sit there and talk about how this is a process that's going to culminate over a period of time, and you're going to chase Manchester City and finish second or whatever, and finally get back into the Champions League, and not go full pelt and get dumped out the same way that other teams that have gone before us have. Because I'm just one of those guys, man. If I'm in something, I'm not there just to participate. I don't like losing, you know, let alone going out early. That pisses me off. And that's just me on a personal level. So you give a good account of yourself in that European competition. And what that does, look, if you go there and you prioritize something like the Champions League, European players, if you go far in that, suddenly go, they only need a little bit more to go a little bit further. Maybe I could be that little bit more. Whereas if you get dumped out of that competition, those players are going to sit there and go, yeah, man, they're coming second in the Premier League, but when they're in Europe, these men are whack. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go somewhere where I think that in a year or two I could win the Champions League.
That heritage is there.
Exactly, and that leads to perhaps us having that Champions League window. You know, if you're suddenly getting into the latter stages of the Champions League, you can push for that caliber of player. So that's another reason as to why I really think you need to go and excel.
But I think when we get to March, April, May, remember last year it was just us and Man City.
Yeah.
I think Liverpool could cloudy the waters a bit this season.
Yeah, they're kind of
could
finding
be Arsenal, Man City, and Liverpool.
Finding a bit
and
of
that
form.
makes it even harder. So
They've
you know what I mean?
reinvented their midfield, and yeah, they've had if I look at the first 4 games of the season for every Big Six club, I'd probably say Liverpool have come out the best of the lot when you
100%.
consider away to 2 Big Six teams.
100%.
Villa, a lot of people predicted top 8. So yeah, Liverpool will be in there with a shot. Let me wrap it up with a final question. Look, quality shown last season, nearly getting over the line and challenging Manchester City for the Premier League title. On top of 100 million spent on Declan Rice and an overall 200 million spent, or let's say 170 because Timber's injured, with Havertz and Rice coming in. And people, key words here, luck of the draw included, because everyone needs some sort of luck of the draw. Arsenal can win the Champions League. Am I having a laugh, Chris?
My heart says you're not having a laugh, but 50 years of
History says
you are. Sorry.
Sheroy, am I having a laugh?
We can win it, but when I say we can win it, I'm talking about, you know, when you talk about a heavyweight having a puncher's chance.
Yeah.
You're in it,
Yeah.
and you've definitely got the propensity, but you will need a lot to go your way.
Doesn't that kind of, do you ever see Arsenal not being that club that go into it with a puncher's chance? I don't ever see Arsenal going into Champions League as favourites, as City have done, or as Real Madrid have done, or
even Wenger went
that's not our MO. It never has been to be that club that spends so much that Champions League is the...
I know, but there were times, man, and I'm talking times not long ago, where I sat there and said, are we ever going to challenge for the Premier League again?
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, but we've renovated or refurbished to the extent that we are.
Yeah.
So all hope is not lost in that sense. This is now the next stage of Arteta's project, process, or whatever you want to call it. This is the European phase.
Wenger got us to 1 final and 1 semi-final with all the talent he had.
Yeah, imagine.
I was balling for that
we're
final.
sitting here saying, because this team's nowhere near good as the Invincibles.
And Champions League is nowhere near as good as it was.
Well,
when
that
we
ought to
was
balance
invincible.
itself out.
So
Right? Yeah.
there is a balancing act there. Yeah. But listen, Chris, lovely as always. Sheroy, as always, it's a pleasure.
Big up you as well, bro.
Sheroy's voice. I'm going to put the channel link either in the title or the description below. Chris Hudson, you can find right here on Supporters Club. And the question goes to you in the comments too. Not the ops, because I know what the ops think. Am I having a laugh? Arsenal can win the Champions League. Let me know in the comments below. Hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe. A lot of good content coming out thick and fast. Everton away around the corner too. Love for the love. We're out. Peace.